Hi everyone, it's Rax. I've been blasting Path of Exile 2 since it came out a couple of weeks ago. I think I'm coming up on 200 hours played. I've done 4 full campaign playthroughs. I finally done one deathless, and I played a couple of characters up into the endgame to about, I would say, T10 maps-ish. And I finally think I've played enough to where I've formulated my opinion on the state of the game. So I'd like to share it with you today to open up a conversation on how the early access Path of Exile 2 can improve for the launch of the game. And if Grinding Your Games is interested in this document, I know they like very abbreviated stuff. I tried to outline this as short as possible and just want to help the game grow, and feel free to add any of your comments as well. I want to thank everyone on my stream today who helped me create this document. They shared a lot of great ideas, and we had some great conversations about this stuff. All right, that's enough of an intro. Let's just get started. And like always, I want to start off with the good things. Well, what are the good things about Path of Exile 2? I mean, I don't know, pretty much everything. The game is in an extremely strong spot. In my opinion, for the early access or the beta or whatever the hell you want to call it, of any ARPG, I would say that this game is probably in the strongest state of any of them, which means that when it launches 6 months to a year from now, I think it's very possible it might be the strongest launch ever. Well, first of all, the engine. I think that's the first thing that you'll notice if you ever played POE1. The way that the gameplay goes, the way that the combat feels, even WASD feels super WSD, whatever the hell you call it. It just feels very, very crisp. I'm sure there will be further performance enhancements before launch, but they've already done such a great job. I'm not really much of an art person, as I say you can't spell fart without art, but actually it really matters in this game. They just did such a nice job. All the zones feel actually completely different. A lot of the animations, even the endgame maps, the difference between the snowy Arctic map and the fiery Forge map is actually pretty incredible. The bosses are close, maybe not quite as good, but close to Elden Ring caliber, which is pretty much the highest compliment I think you can get nowadays. The sounds are amazing. You know, usually I turn on the sounds of the stream just so YouTube chat can hear something because they can't hear the music. But actually, I just genuinely enjoy having the sounds on all the time. I love the music. I love the voice acting. I love hearing the combat. You know, it makes a huge difference actually. The new player experience is vastly improved. Maybe some people who played the early access would disagree and say my experience was terrible. Well, I think compared to PoE1, it's kind of a godsend. The skill gems are easier for people to understand. The skill tree is easier because it doesn't mix and match so much defense with the life nodes. You can pretty much get away with just going all damage, at least early on, and be just fine. The Atlas trees, the way that they've separated them, are certainly easier to understand than the huge, massive one that they had before with the gateways. I think gold and respecking, although I'll be honest with you, I do miss the current, or I do miss the old school, like orb trading, the chaos orb trading, but you honestly kind of have that also again in the end game. I mean, exalts kind of feel like chaos orbs, divines are still super rare. So I don't feel like I've completely lost that, and the ease of respecking in this game, especially after the patches that they have just released, feel pretty good. Um, Attributes for me mostly feel better. This is one of the things that Grinding Gear Games wanted to improve upon. I think that they have improved upon this from PoE1 with how you could choose the +5 as you moved around the tree. But I actually have some feedback about attributes later that I'm honestly not sure if Grinding Gear Games intended for this or not. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The archetypes feel very different. I played a monk all day yesterday, and today I played a ranger, and they do not play the same at all. I got to play completely differently, whether I get close, whether I get far, how I deal with the yellows, this or that, you know, what I can tank, what I can't tank. And I played 4 different archetypes so far. They all feel completely different. They did a very nice job there. The game is challenging, and you're never going to convince me otherwise. I'll never subscribe to the opposite mentality. A game that poses challenges for you to overcome is pretty much the only game worth playing unless you're trying to just AFK and chill. When you beat something or you finally get a god drop, it is a major dopamine hit when you finally kill that boss or whatever. It just feels good. The dodge roll, after they've set our player size to 0, feels pretty good. It's an age-old argument. Should they allow full phasing? If they implement full phasing, I would love it. If they leave it as it is, I can probably deal with it as well once we fine-tune other stuff in the game. I could go either way on it, but I'm always up for just moving where I want to go with full phasing. The in-game wiki, they took that from last Epoch. Very smart idea. I'm sure when Path of Building comes out, we will learn that the in-game tooltips are not to be trusted because they never really can be, because it's too hard to build them out with all the different situations. But at least the tooltips for how things work is infinitely better than the big mystery that Path of Exile 1 is, where you needed a PhD to even play the game. Their communication with the community. They went on so many like podcasts. They talked to so many people. They've been so transparent. Their patch notes even that hit the first business day after their launch weekend have already significantly improved the game, and I'm sure there'll be many more patches before the game actually comes out. So, and I'm sure I could have made this list a lot longer, but almost everything feels really good. I think Path of Exile, with a couple minor tweaks, could have launched the game essentially right now, and it would have been considered a perfectly successful release. Let's talk about areas of improvement. Let me tell you something that I'm not going to talk about. I'm not really going to talk about class balance or melee versus ranged, because this is stuff they're going to be iterating on the entire time. They don't need me to sit here and say, oh, warriors can't do as good as rangers for most of the game until you have god gear, because you go in there and you swing and it sucks, and the ranger is back shooting lightning arrow and shitting on everything. I think it's implied that they will work on that stuff. But I'm going to talk about general things, and then early game and like the campaign, and then end game on a couple of things to think about. So I think one of the biggest things that needs more tuning is ascending. So one of the things that I was led to believe when they were talking about ascending is you actually had a choice in how you would ascend. This is true for the 3rd and 4th trials, certainly. Yes, when you get to the end game, you can choose Ultimatum or Sekimas, and they have a 3rd one that's coming out. I really don't understand how there's a choice in the campaign. You get the Sekimas, and it's like required level. It says it's required level 22 in Act 2, and then the other one is like not till way later. I've heard some people failing it at level 50. And going that long without 2 ascendancy points, it's not really a choice at that point, if you ask me. So that's the first thing. I don't see where the choice is, at least for the first 2 things. One of the biggest problems with ascending is I think a lot of people feel it's more of a chore than something that's really fun to do in this epic moment. When I get done with ascending, I'm like, oh, thank God I finally ascended, rather than, yes, I have ascended. That was so fun, da 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 da. I don't have any great suggestions on how to fix that. In general, like traps in ARPGs, I've never seen them work for any game. Usually players just straight up don't like them and don't have very much fun with them. In my opinion, I actually thought the POE1 lab, from what I've played so far, is actually more enjoyable. And the reason why is I can just zip on through it. I'm just shield charging, boom, 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 boom. And then we one-shot a Zaro 3 times and you're done. That's not as bad as sitting there in Ultimatum, pulling the lever, raising the gate, walking forward, carrying it back, activating it, standing there for a minute 30. Not the most fun experience. Regarding those suggested levels, they seem way off for the average player. A lot of people are kind of annoyed by that, especially new players. It says, oh yeah, you can go in at level 22 and beat this. Yes, if you're an experienced veteran and you have really good gear and you have a good build and you know what you're doing, sure, you can beat it right when you get it. But most people going in there, you're just going to get shit on. And usually people have to over level a lot. So that's another thing to consider. And then finally, as you get to the final ascendancies, I think most players would agree that, like, especially getting your 4th ascendancy is almost in like the top 1% territory. So, what does ascending mean to grinding gear games? Is ascending to like the fourth level, is that for like is that for your elite players? Is that the game design? I'm going to imagine that newer players to the franchise will be expecting that they should be able to complete their ascension within a league. I think with the current state of the game and how it's currently tuned, I don't think most people are going to be completing their fourth ascension at all. So is it an endgame thing? Now, I think like things like the pinnacle bosses are certainly going to be out of reach for the average player. It's just going to be too difficult, of course. But it's actually just more of a question. Like, what is the fourth ascension supposed to mean to grinding gear games is something I'd love to know. And one final thing, it would be a crime if I didn't admit this. Yes, they literally updated the tooltip where it's like gold and it says you will get points if you do this, but I still think it's pretty confusing. There's like all these different keys and they have different levels and they have different number of rooms or they have different number of trials. I think everybody is just pausing and reading it meticulously anytime they get one to make sure, okay, is this the thing I really want to run? I think if that was simplified a little bit even further, it would go a long way. So I think ascending needs another review there. Okay, let's talk about the maps and the zone layouts. So first of all, I could understand why grinding gear games did this. It actually makes perfect sense. Seems like such a smart idea. Hey, let's make the zones really, really big. And you want to know why we're going to do that? So people aren't in town. They're actually playing the game. I like it. They have a pause feature. You can log out. You start back where you were. What's the problem? Makes sense. The problem is when so many zones take so long to complete, at a certain point, it actually feels exhausting. The analogy I give here is the three little bears. You know, one is too hot, one is too cold, one is just right. Maybe a lot of these ARPGs are so zoomy and the zones are so short, you aren't actually exploring anything. You're just zipping from one door to the other, boom, 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 and it's like you're playing pinball. You're not even actually playing a game. But when every zone just feels so monstrous, you don't have any variance. Like if you want to make this big epic city in the campaign, oh, here's the big epic city. Oh, you mean the big epic city that was right after the big gigantic jungle, which is right before the big huge factory. So I think it would be good for grinding gear games to take a look, especially in the campaign. I felt this much more in the campaign than the end game. When I was mapping, I was actually pretty content. I actually kind of liked it just to chill and just blast through the maps. And I felt like I spent a lot more time fighting in POE2 than in the other games. And that I think is a good thing. But especially in the campaign, it's like, oh my God. At a certain point, it's like, does this zone ever end? One thing that I feel very strongly about, I think this is very, very off, is the radius at which your character is to certain major points and how it reveals on the mini map. So if you're walking along the edge of the map and there's a door next to you to go to the next zone, you have to be like right in front of it or right in front of a waypoint for it to be revealed on your map. And if you miss it, it could mean like 10 minutes of additional walking around, like, where is the door? And then when you finally go back, oh my God, I was 1 inch away from it and it didn't reveal it. That feels so bad. There's no way I'm the only person that's happened to. So I think that grinding your games should be way more lenient on that. And I put in here as a joke, don't you dare tell me that that's what the light radius stat is for. I actually can't even believe that that's a stat in the game. So I think that my tooth, sorry. I think that absolutely has to change. I think you need to be a lot more lenient on that, especially if you're not going to reduce the zone size. Okay, runes. I think this is almost universally agreed upon. I think it would just feel better if you could change them out. Again, I understand why grinding gear games would open up with you can't change them out. It's to make your decisions matter, and that's great. These socketable items, and with the way that the game currently progresses, and with losing the crafting bench, and with losing scouring orbs, also losing the ability to resocket something is super, super brutal and almost getting to the point where you aren't really letting me make my character, and it's almost becoming more pain than what it's worth. And then there's also some item types that can't use runes. Like I think wands and minion scepters can't even use them. That's kind of a feels bad. I played my minion witch fourth, and I was like, oh, I can't do anything with these runes to make my minion stronger. That was kind of a feels bad moment. Okay, I think this is something that maybe 99% of people would agree on. The wells. I like the idea of the well. You're in town, you drink the well, you get full mana, you get full life, you get full flask. Yeah, I drank out of the well. It was in Diablo 2. Hell yeah. Well, I just think the reward is not even close to the pain. So you go in town, you craft on some flask, you switch out a flask, or you just got out of a very, very big fight and you're beat to shit. You port to town, you sell your items, you take a breath, you pour it back down. And because you didn't click the well, now you're just going to get shit on again. And now you're pissed off and you have to go to the side and TP back. Again, I can't be the only person this has happened to. The well is a cool idea in theory. Click the well, it replenish your stuff. I think you just auto heal the life and the flask the moment that you port to town. I think it's the pain is way higher than the reward. Okay, it would be a travesty if I didn't ask for this. This is kind of a new feature, but I would love it if Path of Exile of all games is the game that needs to implement this. The visual clutter. I just did a little race with Ben, and Ben was throwing sparks everywhere, and I was throwing flame walls everywhere. Every boss, I was like, well, I hope the boss is not throwing something on top of me, because you want to know what? I can't see jack shit. I can't see anything. Can't see the ground. I would love it. This is such an important feature. Like maybe potentially my number one ask. Can you please make a mode where, like, whatever it is, 90% of all spells and minions, like maybe so you can just see that they're kind of there, are like faded out or transparent, so I can see the boss mechanics as I'm playing, or an ability to hide other people's spells in the party, maybe entirely or whatever. I mean, you guys can figure it out. We need a visual clutter game mode, especially for the really tough bosses. Please, it would be such a nice add. I'm going to say this in every game. It has nothing to do with Path of Exile 2. It has to do with every ARPG ever. I've been saying this since I started content creation. In ARPGs, you should never, ever have two things. Ever. You should never have an on-death effect. It should never be you killed a monster, you won, no surprise, you lost. That is not an interesting gameplay challenge for people to solve. It just pisses them off for absolutely no gain. There should never be a door. Never. Never for any reason. Not for lore, the big door opening the tomb. No. Oh, I put the door there to compartmentalize the monsters. No. Have the monsters engage when we walk into the doorway. Kind of like a line of sight thing. Every on-death effect and every door needs to be removed in every part of the game, in every ARPG that's ever been made or ever will be made. There's no defense. Minions, not a huge problem. Minion AI is a problem in like every game. For the most part, minions do pretty well, but they do get stuck in doors and hallways, and mine actually got locked out outside of boss fights. I had to do like 4 times. I had to pour it out and pour it back in to get my minions inside the bosses. Now, here's kind of an interesting thing that some people will disagree with. Well, they won't disagree with the fact that it exists, but they'll disagree with the fact that it should be changed. In Path of Exile 2, it feels like almost all of your power comes from items. Now, in general, that's actually the concept of that, items being really, really powerful, is good. I like that. Because if it isn't that way, then when you get a godly item, and that's what ARPGs are, it's about hunting for godly items and crafting godly items and using them to kill really tough monsters, right? That's the whole idea. So you got no argument for me at all that that's the main idea of ARPGs, and honestly, that's the way that the game should be designed. But I think it's at a pretty extreme, and I would like to give you an example. So let's consider two situations. You have a brand new player, and they really know what they're doing. They're really smart. They have a really good skill tree. They pick very good synergistic skills and support gems. They ascend and they have their ascendancy points. They're really good players. And guess what? They have dog shit gear. Their weapon is like 15 levels behind them. It doesn't have flat damage. They can't craft anything better. They have no life. They have no resistances. Like, they have the worst luck ever. What will be the state of this character? They'll be terrible. You won't be able to do jack shit. If you have bad gear, it doesn't matter. If everything else is lined up, you're going to get shit on. Unless you're like a minion, which maybe your minions can kind of get you there. But if you're playing like a warrior, for example, you're done for. Let's flip the script. Let's say you're a new player and you're not very smart. You don't really know like what you're doing at all. You don't make a good skill tree. Your skill gems don't really make a whole lot of sense. Maybe you don't even have your ascendancy points, but you have really good gear. You have a godly yellow with flat damage and percent fizz. You got life everywhere. You got resist. You got movement speed on your boots. You're going to be just fine. I mean, use your main skill and swing, and it's not going to be perfect because you messed up everything else, but you'll be just fine. Just as an illustration, that's the way that the game is. So I think that grinding gear games should at least take a look at it. What I'm saying, I don't want you to flip flop the entire thing. I love that items are really valuable, but some of the other things I think could be buffed a little bit so it's not as lopsided. That'd be my feedback there. Now let's talk about the early game in Path of Exile. So when you're really low, like maybe in the campaign or something, how do things go? Now this is something that we had a big discussion on. It was myself, Crouching Tuna, Zizarin, and Ziggy D had a podcast with those guys. Great content creators, by the way. Love those guys. We talked about looting and crafting in the early game and kind of how it goes. So I heard Grinding Gear Games say on an interview that they want crafting to be a really, really big part of the game. They want you to be crafting all the time, and they did some tests, and people weren't crafting, so they increased the crafting mats, and they want you to get in there and craft all the time. Like, that's the idea of the game. Okay, that sounds great. After leveling up 4 times, and by the way, when I level up, I purposely don't give myself twink gear. I don't go to the gambler and gamble really godly shit so I'm just dominating everything, because I want to actually get the experience, right? I want to see what it feels like to level these classes. If you just cheat with really good gear, you don't learn anything. And my conclusion is crafting doesn't play a huge role in the campaign because we really don't have the tools to make great items. And you might say, what the hell are you talking about, Rax? You get the bases, you have the transmutes, you have the augs, you regal them, you slam the exalts in, you have essences, you can add sockets and get your own resistances. That's every tool that you need. Well, yeah, on paper, but in practice, that's not really how it goes. So how does it really go? So you start out, and when you first start, you'll do anything. And the vendors actually have sometimes the very best gear possible. And in the beginning, you'll take pretty much anything. You're looking for a really good weapon. And you'll start to build up some orbs and some transmutes. You get a regal, an alch, and if you're lucky, you'll get a couple of chaos or a couple of exalts here or there. And then you have to make a decision. It's like, okay, well, I found this with a good thing of life. I'll aug it, and usually won't get anything that good. And then you have a decision. It's like, well, I have 2 regals. Do I regal this? I mean, it's kind of better than mine. Okay, I guess I'll YOLO regal it. And then usually you won't hit anything too amazing, or maybe you do. And then you're like, okay, I've got this 3 stat item that's pretty good in Act 1. I'll put it on now. And then maybe I only have 1 exalt, but I don't know if I should use my exalt here because it's already pretty good. It's like, okay, well, maybe I'll wait until later and see when I get something a little bit better. And you play and play and play. And then what it becomes is, because the crafting materials are so scarce and low, like the really valuable ones, like the exalts and the regals and the alchs, What ends up happening is you just pretty much go with the best yellows that drop on the ground or the ones that you buy from the vendor. The my campaign clears sped up a lot when I stopped trying to craft. I'm sitting there trying to make this thing work, trying to make this thing good in the early game. That was way worse than just running forward and just waiting for the next yellow pair of boots to drop that had movement speed, or just checking the vendor when I level up when I'm in town enemy very quickly. If I compare this to POE1, I actually felt like crafting was a much more integral part of my leveling experience, even though it was way simpler. So what happens in POE1 when you do the 10-act campaign? Well, you might update like each yellow piece of gear on your character, like maybe you upgrade each slot like 3 or 4 times in the run. And every time you get a better yellow or a yellow that could be better, it's so easy to fix it. You just pour it to your hideout, and like for 1 transmute or whatever the cost is, 1 alch, whatever it is, you put on a really fat resistance, or you put on some life, or you put on some movement speed. Boom, and you're on your way. That's it. It's really fast, it's really quick, and I feel like crafting in POE1 was actually a more integral part of the campaign than later. And remember, this is early game feedback. Crafting is actually much better in the end game. I've made some really good items in the end game, whereas early game, I'm like always broke. So I wanted to leave the feedback that that was my experience and why. And if crafting is supposed to be a very important part of like the campaign, which is probably going to be where a lot, because the campaign is has so much content in it, we're going to get three more acts. A lot of people are going to spend their time there. I think if you want people to really craft, we need to rethink some things, because right now my advice would be don't craft, run forward, look for the yellows on the ground and buy it from the vendor. By the way, side note, I really don't think you should nerf the vendors. The vendors don't just vomit out godly gear. You have to search for it, which I think is the right balance. It's just that the crafting part is not playing a big role for me at all. Again, it kind of just a general thing, like the thing that we said that we wouldn't talk about, the balance thing they're going to work on for months. Warrior feels, may feel a lot worse than Ranger in Act 1. This is pretty obvious they'll be working on that. One thing that I found in all 4 of my playthroughs, and this is early game feedback only in the early game, I get a lot of skill gems, but I don't get the supports, and the spirit gems are very, very rare. When I get my SRS the first time, I'm pretty much counting on I will never be able to upgrade my SRS again until the next quest that drops me a spirit gem. I'm not sure if that's the intention, but I'm guessing that it wasn't. Okay, talking about 2 of the acts here, let's talk about Act 1. This is something that this is definitely going to be a contested topic. I'll be completely honest with you. I really don't care what Grinding Gear Games does with this. I don't care at all. You could make it more difficult. You could leave it, or you could make it easier. You could do whatever you want. The feedback that I would give here, like strategy-wise, is Act 1 has a couple of things going on with it that the other acts don't have. You're starting out, you don't have any gear, and gear carries you pretty hard from what we talked about earlier. Even if you're going along the right skill path, you don't have many skills on your skill tree. You don't have your ascendancy. You don't really have anything except for the items that you picked up and a couple of basic skills that you started off with. And Act 1 is tough. It's pretty tough. I mean, right away, the Devourer can kill you. The Cold Girl can kill you. The King of the Mist to get your first Spirit Gem. Pretty tough fight. You got to actually know what you're doing. I like it. I said earlier in one of the great things about the game is challenging. But a lot of people the Path of Exile 2 is either their first time in an ARPG or their first time with Grinding Gear games because they never gave POE1 a chance. And I think making Act 1 extremely difficult is going to cull a lot might be a strong word, but a decent chunk of the player base. Then some of the POE1 veterans will say, that's exactly what we want. Get those shits out of here. We don't want this to be a casual noob clown fiesta. Okay, I understand. I played Elden Ring. I know what the Souls community is like. Like I said, I'm good with whatever they do, but I think the difficulty with a couple of other combining factors that I spoke about makes it a little bit tough for a new player. Like they're gonna need like they're gonna need a pretty good build guide, or they're just gonna have to tough their way out and figure it out in order to get a little bit stronger to where they can have a build strong enough to carry themselves through the rest of the acts. I think it comes together for most classes pretty much already in Act 2, but Act 1 difficulty, grinding gear games, if one of your key goals is entry into the game, you might want to consider reducing the difficulty a little bit, be my feedback. One thing about Act 2, I'm sorry, like this might be, I need to get good and I have a low IQ. I never know what to do. I never know what's going on. Where is the caravan? Do I go above ground or below ground? Where do I go? Like, I've done it, I guess, 8 times now. And I just go to the thing and I just hope that the little indicator is taking me the right way. Anything that you could do to make it a little bit more obvious for where the hell we're supposed to go, I think people would appreciate. I'm going to memorize it no matter what. I'm going to play so much POE2. It doesn't matter how confusing it is. But while I'm fresh, I'll let you know it's pretty confusing to me. Let's talk about the end game now. In my opinion, I can't think of anything higher. I think this is the biggest problem with Path of Exile 2. If I could only change one thing about the game, it would be this: how maps complete usually in the end game. How do you beat a map? Usually you kill all the rares. I believe the way that it works is, I think the patch notes said when there's 200 or less monsters after you're clearing out all the trash, the yellow icons will appear on the map and you go kill them. It's easy to understand. It's not a big deal. Problem is it's brutal. So the number of times that I can successfully traverse the beginning and the middle of a map, and then I'm at the end of the map, and I haven't missed one random yellow behind me, 3 football fields behind me, is very, very low. And it just feels so bad. Some people are crying that they just want to have a boss at the end of each map, kill it, and be done. I'm not, like, it doesn't have to be that. It's whatever solution you want to implement. I would venture to say, I make a bold statement, I would say everyone universally considers this a problem. The new players, the veterans, I bet even the employees of grinding gear games that have played it. There is so much backtracking with how you currently complete a map. I think it needs a revisit. Whatever solution you want is totally fine with me. I would say this is the biggest problem with the game, because the repeatable maps in the end game is going to be one of the main activities for all players going forward. It needs to be just right. It needs to be given a lot of attention. Please look at how maps are completed and a better solution for how we can kill these rares and get our completion without backtracking through the map. It's terrible. One thing about uniques, I don't think anything's going to change from this, but to put it lightly, I guess most people say just uniques are garbage. I'm kind of at that point where I've found so many uniques. When a unique drops, it's like, oh, what weird, obscure thing is this thing going to do that I'm just going to throw it in my unique tab and never see it again? And again, like, I think Grinding Gear Games knows what they're doing here. They know how to design video games. I mean, they made things like Mage Blood and Headhunter, and everything can't be, as I wrote right here, everything can't be a best in slot unique. You can't just find a unique and put it on every time. That would break the game as well. But I just wanted to share the feedback that early on, I mean, unless you get it really, really early in the campaign, like the first unique I got was the helmet that burns enemies for 100 damage, or ignites enemies for 100 damage. That was great. I just ran around with a hat on and burned everything. That was fun. Every other unique that I found has just been instantly vendored or sold to, or put in the unique tab, probably never to be seen again. This point has gotten better for me, but I'll share it anyway. As you're moving through the end game, the way that it was described is there would be lots of points of interest and surprises, like, oh, there's a vendor here, or there's a unique map here, da 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 da. For the longest time, I really barely found any unique maps. I found a vault, but I couldn't open it, and I got a new hideout, but it essentially just most of it was me just kind of traversing through the terrain and doing the towers and not seeing a ton of really special things. Now that I've learned a little bit more about the endgame and I know kind of what I'm looking for, I'm seeing them a little bit more. But I think most people, especially people that aren't ultimate blasters, are going to kind of feel like maybe there could be some more points of interest or interesting things with a little bit higher cadence. Now, again, same thing with the unique problem. You can't put shit everywhere. If you put stuff everywhere, then it's not exciting, right? If you put a cool thing every other map, it's no longer a cool thing, it's an expected thing. But it took me a while to find really anything that wasn't a map. It's the feedback I wanted to give. By the way, it's not just Augury, it's the Val map. I can't remember what's. Dude, these maps are terrible, man. The Augury with the 3 levers that you have to sit there with the RP. You can't cancel the RP and the minions can continue to attack you. And that Val map with 500 doors and super compartmentalized rooms. I think I don't think there's a choice. I think you just have to remove them. These maps are a big value loss in the end game. It's good to have diversity, but diversity like this is never good. I don't know any. Whoever likes these maps, I'm sorry, you're Satan. I'm sorry. Okay. I think this is the last thing. Okay. So, not really like a direct point of feedback, like grinding gear games. I want you to change this, but kind of opening up the door to a conversation. What I heard grinding gear games say is they wanted attributes to be a lot more accessible, or let's use the word solvable in POE2. The way that they do that is you path through the tree and you can choose the +5 stat as you're moving along, and then you can respec freely. And that has done a great job. And in the campaign, I was never like hard stuck. I don't think one time I was able to fix it. I did notice in a lot of my leveling builds that it was a good idea if you were close to like the +25 main stat node to pick it up. And I did also notice that I would find myself pathing to a notable, even if it wasn't like the best notable that I wanted right then. But if it gave 10 to a main stat, I would take it because then that would solve some gearing issues. And I think thinking like this is totally fine and cool. Like, the whole point of games is for you to create problems for us to kind of intelligently solve and give us the tools to do so. And that's what we're doing, and it works fine in the campaign. The feedback or the conversation I want to start with grinding gear games is in the end game, on all of the characters that I played so far, the attribute requirements for this bow requires 212 dex. Or this chess piece requires 80 of this and 80 of that. Or I would like to use a spell on cast on shock on my ranger, but I don't have any int. And ball lightning costs 95 int for the first level of ball lightning. To come up with 95 int out of nothing, I mean, some of the time, like I go to the passive tree and I type in int, and there's no way I can do it. I can't path with int because then I don't have enough dex to wear my bow. But I feel like some of the game is actually kind of locked out from me. And some of the requirements are a little steep. Again, let me reiterate. What I'm not sitting here saying is lower the attribute requirements so low that they don't mean anything. We want to have the game have interesting problems for us to solve. But what I'm saying is some of these are quite brutal. Like, oh, I'm gonna have to slot one of my stats on some piece of gear for a 30 int ring so I can take a minimum level ball lightning cast on shock on my ranger, something like that. So, and by the way, that situation actually happened to me after I took the 25 dex node, and after I took, I think, a notable that gives me 8% more dex. I'm still going to have to go get a big chunky, whatever, 30 int somewhere just to get the basic level of a spell. So to start a conversation on this, just a simple question: is that what you intended? Like, is that the degree of the difficulty of the attributes in the end game? I understand it's not going to be the same from every build, but I am telling you, I am feeling a lot of attribute pressure. I don't know if other people are experiencing the same thing, but not so much in the campaign. It's not too brutal in the campaign, but in the end game, I'm feeling it way worse. And it kind of surprised me because I didn't think from hearing Grinding Gear Games conversations that that was the intention. Anyway, oh my god, this video is 40 minutes long. I need to stop talking. I wanted to make a video. People ask me all the time, what do I think about Path of Exile 2? I think the game is absolutely fantastic. I make this video and I make this document with a smile on my face. I don't. People say I never smile in my videos. There's a smile for you. I think the game is fantastic. I think with 6 months to a year of development, I think it's going to get a lot better. I'm sure there are other things that I missed. Like if there's a big topic that I missed, post it down below. If there's a really good one, I'll pin it and we can argue about it for 5 million years. Just giving my opinion, man. I don't know everything, but I do like the game and I would like the game to be very successful. So I want this video to be an open dialogue. I want to start a conversation about these things. I would love to know, did you agree with me? You think I'm a stupid ass piece of shit and everything I said was wrong? Let me know down below. Anyway, nice job, Grinding Gear Games. When you or EHG or Blizzard, whenever you guys release something good, it's just the best thing in a free market is competition, right? So you're setting the bar very high, and I think this is not only going to be good for Path of Exile, but hopefully, I mean, maybe this is big copium, hopefully good for other ARPGs as well. Thank you for a job very well done. I can't wait to see what you come up with, and I hope to be a part of it for a long time. Thank you.